In every neighborhood, there is one house that adults whisper about and children cross the street to avoid. Now, Wes Craven, creator of A Nightmare on Elm Street, takes you inside.
Something's in there.
We gotta get out of here, Leroy.
All sorts of rumors about what goes on in that house. The police never took it serious.
She's been feeding that thing between the walls again.
Very, very tense about this.
What goes on in this house is a sin. But what goes on under the stairs is a nightmare. Wes Craven's The People Under the Stairs.
Hello, boils and ghouls. It's your old pal, John Cassier, the voice of the Crypt Keeper. And I want to welcome my good fiends of the Horror Heals podcast. Is horror good for mental wellness? But of course it is. I delight in the delicious deaths of pitiful people on the silver screen. So get ready for a hell of a good time with my new fiends, Corey and Kendall, on the Horror Heals podcast.
Have you ever been so depressed that you didn't want a pet? You wanted a murderous sock monster to handle your problems for you instead? No? Just Sean Whalen. Okay, perfect. Welcome to Horror Heals, the podcast where we explore how horror films, freaks, and fandoms do more than scare us. They save us. And today's guest is a cult icon who crawled out of the walls of The People Under the Stairs, survived countless horror films, and just made his directorial debut with Crust, a gloriously weird, hilarious tale born from heartbreak and healing. Sean Whalen joins us to talk about horror as therapy, turning grief into monsters, and why the horror community is the most loyal, loving, and totally twisted fan base on the planet. So, if you've ever felt seen by a freak or comforted by chaos, you're about to meet your new favorite filmmaker. Sean, welcome to the Horror Heals podcast.
Hi, how are you?
Fantastic.
Great.
So, before we got on, we were just letting you know that we watched Crust last night, your directorial debut. Congratulations, first off, because I know firsthand how difficult it is to make a movie, to get a movie made. And kudos to you for making it happen.
Thank you. Yeah, it wasn't easy, but we got it.
And I'm a big fan of horror comedy, so I was laughing out loud through a lot of it. And something that we really appreciate is that, and I think you know this from doing conventions and things like that, is that the horror fans don't allow our actors and performers and horror people to age out. There's no aging out, for horror fans. So we love to see, the classic stars pop back up. So, Felissa Rose and Daniel Roebuck and Ricky Dean Logan.
Yeah.
Awesome to see them, And so,
yes.
And Kendall just laughs at me whenever we're watching something. And I'm like, oh, Ricky Dean Logan. I didn't know he was in this. Kendall's reminding me that is.
God, he's so funny.
Yeah, absolutely.
He cracked out. Well, when I like to cast people stuff they normally don't get,
Yep.
Right. Yeah. Can you just talk a little bit about what it's like now, knowing it's out there in the world and fans are seeing it, and I'm sure you're getting feedback on it?
Yeah, it came out of my mental health, actually. I had a pretty bad depression after my divorce. And it wasn't, sadness. I was in the divorced dad apartment and the holidays were coming up and I felt the failure of my kids that we sold our house and they were in the divorced dad apartment. And it just got me very depressed and I came out of it. And then, a lot of people in this early of the following year, I got out of it. I got very angry and I didn't know why. It wasn't specific. I don't know if it was like I was mad that I wasted time being depressed or anything. I channeled that into writing this script because people were like, oh, you should have a pet. And I was like, I couldn't take care of myself, let alone a pet. The pet I would like is a one that could take care of my problems for me. And I had pitched this idea a long time ago of a sock monster and a laundromat, and they just kind of merged together, and called one of my good friends, Jim Wald, who's so funny and very specific about scripts. So I just said, let's write this together. We did. And it sat around for 6-7 years. I met with different producers along the way, and then finally circled back. I was going to start it with Felissa Rose, and then we circled back, and I met her new production partner who was a perfect fit. And we did an Indiegogo that was huge. It did very well. And it was just very nice to know that someone like me is a character actor. I never had a big lead in a series, and I never had a huge lead in a studio movie or anything like that, that people were like, hey, man, we want to see you in bigger roles. And they supported me, put it out there. And, we had a blast shooting it. It was a labor of love, all my good friends, and Felissa got a great crew. And it was just a love fest up in a laundromat in Newhall, California. We shot 11 days there and another on a studio. And there was always such good vibes around it. And then we finally get it released, and just the people who were into it from the beginning. The Indiegogo, I had a guy fly out from Pennsylvania to land in LA and then drive out to Palmdale to see the first showing at a theater. Incredible stuff. So, and the people who really liked it, like I had a fan club, Krusty's fan club on Facebook, that started at the Indiegogo level. And they were with me the whole journey of finally getting it out there. And they finally saw it and they love it. And they're buying merch left and right, and Crust plushies and, all this other stuff that I have. And it's one of those ones that, the rollout didn't happen as well. Anchor Bay was brand new kind of reboot. So there were little learning curve stuff there. So it's going to be one of those ones that's a slow roll, it's going to be a slow roll. But the people who love it, I haven't gotten one bad review, not one. So I'm very excited, and we keep expanding. It just got onto Tubi and Apple TV, and, it's pretty exciting. So I think it's nice because as a director, it's so rare that it's perfectly received the same way you intended. And it is being received the same way I intended. Funny, silly, a lot of heart, and a lot of laughs. I think people thought it was a lot more heart and a lot more laughs than they thought it would, which is great.
Absolutely, yeah. So Kendall and I started planning this podcast just a little over a year ago, and the inspiration came from attending a horror convention and just seeing the rapport that guests have with the fans. And so when we started talking about this and I started making a list of guests we wanted to get, you were on there. And this was even before, Crust. Wow. So what is great is that I love, and I'm sensing that this was like a very therapeutic experience for you. And what does it mean to you to have the fans come out and support you like this, the people that have been watching you for years?
Yeah, I think what was really good is I got really big on social media and TikTok in the pandemic. And, what was great is people were saying, you're underrated. You're underrated. And I thought, I finally went, is that an insult? Are you guys insulting? And they said, no, we see you as valuable, but you're not working as much as we think you should. So when I did my Indiegogo, they all showed up and they said, we weren't kidding. We wanted you to see it. The other nice thing is a lot of young people are talking about it because they said, look, mental health is important to us. And we didn't grow up like you. We didn't have cool, weird movies like Rocky Horror and Swamp Thing and Toxic Avenger. They grew up with corporate, MCU and Harry Potter and Hunger Games. The weird, quirky movies are hard to find. And so they really appreciated that this is their weird little cult movie that they can relate to. And they said, and look, we get movies about mental health all the time, but they beat you over the head with it. And you didn't beat us over the head with it. It was just part of it. Part of it is that Vegas, my character is struggling with depression. And luckily it doesn't slow down the film or anything, but it's part of who he is as opposed to, you've got to go take a run, or, it was subtle. And so I think that's I've had a neurodivergent person, say, look, as a neuro person, I have a background movie and it used to be this, and just letting you know that now it's Crust, and, I like to have it on all the time. And so all that's why you do these things, so you have something out there in the world that hopefully is positive and starts a discussion. Like, I didn't know my movie, then a famous editor said to me, you have the movie that your idea, then the movie you write, then the movie you shoot, then you end up with the movie you have, all different. And the movie I have is a referendum on saying there are no shortcuts to mental health. Drinking, partying, murdering people. Those are not solutions to mental health. There's no shortcuts. And everyone in my movie is struggling with some sort of either past or future or whatever, and they're dealing with their own things, but the shortcuts aren't working. So that's what I ended up with. And I didn't realize that's what I was writing. That wasn't the intention, but it kind of ended that way.
Something Kendall always mentions is that, especially if he's having a trying day at work, Kendall's been in human resources for 30 years.
Oh,
so imagine. Yeah.
My wife is in HR as well. She's a benefits director.
Yep. It's not
Nightmare.
always.
So, no, like Kendall loves the benefit side of things, and then problem solving. It's just, if you didn't have to deal with people. And so sometimes he will come home and say, oh my gosh, I just got to get this day out of my head. We need to watch Jason Voorhees just go to town on some kids.
My wife goes, when I was directing and all these people were coming out, and she goes, welcome to it, man. She goes, me in HR, we get kicked in the teeth every day and have to smile.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I was telling Corey a situation yesterday. It's, oh my God,
Yeah.
But it is what it is. I'm good at it, right? Or I wouldn't still be trying it. But you need a break and you need a release. And that's what I found with your movie. It's, oh my gosh. The first guy got stuck in the...
Les, his name.
Les. Oh my God. That just warmed my heart in a very strange way.
People, there was very funny. There was like a woman goes, well, he used the B word a lot. I was glad to see him go.
Yep. Funny how some things are like memorable. Exactly. Yeah, I loved it.
And he's a wonderful person. It was very funny. He was almost not going to do the movie, and I was like, dude, you got to. And we were talking, and I've known him for years. He's a wonderful, lovely person. And he's, I'm glad you fought for me. It's something about a SAG card. He goes, you really wanted me for the movie, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, relax, buddy. You also fit in the dryer.
Logistics matter, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. Easy, Laurence Olivier. You also fit in the dryer. So what did you guys think of the mental health aspect of the movie?
That just speaks to what we're doing, why we started doing this, because, what really the aha moment was, I was standing in line to meet Sam Raimi, and there was this young man behind me that was clearly in duress. He was holding a stack of DVDs. He was kind of shaking, kind of muttering to himself a little bit. And you know how those conventions are. You're packed in like sardines.
Yeah.
And I was about to say, hey, man, if you want to step out, to go to an area where there's not a lot of people, we'll just let you back in when it's your turn. The other guy next to him saw his DVDs and he's, oh, man, I love that movie. And all of a sudden, like, all the anxiety washed away. And this kid had a friend and they just started talking. And it was just like, I knew that it was right then and there. It was like, oh, this is something. Then I had a nice little chat with Sam Raimi, and I immediately called Kendall because he had been pestering me. We have another podcast that we've been doing for 3 years called Family Twist. And he said, we need to do a horror one. Horror is part of the reason that, that's been a part of our relationship for the last 20 years. And I'm like, well, what are we going to talk about? I don't want to do like another review podcast. And so I told him the story, and he's, yeah, I can see that. And it's just, horror conventions are my happy place. Yeah, I love meeting new people and having people come up and start conversations, and you meet new friends while you're waiting in line, and you just feel the positive energy from everybody. And it's like people from all walks of life, and it's all ages. It's grandmas down to infants dressed up as Pennywise the Clown. It's
But it's a community, right? Everybody needs a community. I remember seeing Trekkies, And one of my negative friends was like, "Oh, what a bunch of losers, that this woman calling herself a commander." And, and he was like, dude, this woman is a lesbian in Iowa. She doesn't have a lot of community. And so the Star Trek community is her community. And it was actually Scott who helms The Walking Dead. And he said, and it was him. We've been friends for a long time. And he just said, look, everybody needs a community. And for her to be a commander and seen as respected is a lot better than she probably feels when she walks down the street.
Right.
So everybody needs their community. People say to me, "Oh, how'd you get into horror?" And I said, it was the audition that came across the desk. I didn't seek out Wes Craven and say, I need to be in your movies. I got an audition for Roach. And then when Facebook came 20 years later, people said, "Oh, Roach." And I was like, what? They all loved the character. And then I started going out to conventions and I realized that these people, they're very protective and they're very, you said, no one ages out. No one says, I don't need to see, this woman anymore because she's over 40, or Sean Whalen because he's getting older, or, none of that. So I also realized that, and they're just so supportive of the people they like, the people go, "Oh, well, don't you love going to Comic-Cons for Twister?" And I go, look, all those people are dressed up and they're all trying to party or they're trying to get some cred for their costumes. Now you walk around, you see them post, there's all those people posting their costumes on these YouTube sites and stuff. And I said, but the horror community comes and buys things and talks to you and wants to know stuff about you. You know what I mean? It's not about them. Yes, there's cosplayers and stuff, but even the cosplayers come over and want to meet you and talk to you. And so and what's so nice, if, it's the heartbreak is if People Under the Stairs opened and had 6 weeks at #1 now, it would be mind blowing. But 6 weeks in 91, it didn't matter. It was a horror movie. And it was like, was that your big break? And I go, no, because it didn't blow up, but 6 weeks at #1 is huge. But horror doesn't have the same cachet. And now it's like the only thing that's selling. So if I had a comedy, I'm turning it into a horror comedy because my community is just so supportive and I really support them. And I'm definitely, getting more into horror stuff, but it's always been socially conscious. I mean, Night of the Living Dead was a referendum on civil rights. Right. You know what I mean? So I had no idea why people love this movie so much. And I'm watching it and I'm sitting there thinking, oh, man, yeah, okay, first zombie movie, very cool. But then the ending comes and just go, this is amazing. Just like Texas Chainsaw having a disabled person. Like, it's just things they don't have to do, but they choose to do. So for me, doing Crust with the mental health aspect is great. My next movie, Swipe, is about, we just shot it with Rebecca Kennedy as the lead, who was Neela. But it's about a sister saving her brother from these women who captured him because he was catfished on a dating site. And so it's a woman saving her brother and other men from a mother and her crazy daughters, like Texas Chainsaw, but they're torturing men. So it's a woman saving a man from crazy women. And I go, just because, let's flip the script.
Yep.
And, the father was abusive to the mother and the daughters. That's why they're like that. Another tough story point is their younger sister committed suicide after being raped. And so they're angry and this is what they do, but they're all nuts. So, but again, I'm not trying to shove a socially conscious movie down your throat. It's a fun movie. These are great iconic women characters. We've never seen Hana May Lee from Pitch Perfect. She plays like a woman that's mute and wears a blue tuxedo and a bladed dildo. Those people, it's insane. It's insanely fun. But again, I think horror is very smart that way. They know how to mess with, they have really great commentary on society. And most people don't know it. And I didn't even know that People Under the Stairs was so ahead of its time socially, It's an older, nerdy white guy writing about wealth gap and slumlords.
It's always very socially conscious too. I mean, his approach to movies, there's a mess. It's not hitting you over the head.
Yeah.
And the two movies that you mentioned, Texas Chainsaw and Night of the Living Dead, like there was no go-go back then, so they had to beg, borrow, and steal because they had their vision and they weren't going to let, the studio system compromise that. And what's interesting now is we're starting to see, mainstream studios, indie movies, and like The Substance, and Smile was just fantastic. So there's like these big 2,000, 3,000 theaters now, and it's like, oh, finally, like So it's just
I think The Substance being nominated, and I think that Sinners is going to be. Have you guys seen it yet?
No, I want to see it so bad. Kendall's on a big go to the theater. He's like, let's watch it.
Now listen, do not wait till it comes on TV. See it in a theater. If you can, see it in IMAX, but see it in a theater.
What?
Have to support Ryan Coogler making a horror, you know what I mean? And making it.
And it's, it's like, I don't know. There's the first time I saw that trailer, I'm like, there's something. And when you see, especially a horror movie, to see like no drop between this weekend and second weekend box office. And that tells you that that they're about this movie, and
What's interesting now, and what I'm really trying to do is what I'm seeing, or what feels like what's happening, is the hook is kind of the key. Late Night with the Devil. Well, it's an exorcism movie. We've seen those. We've all seen those, but it's on a late night talk show. That's the hook, right? And then it's, in A Violent Nature, it's, a murder, but it's from the Slayer's point. Like, there's got to be a good twist, and that's why I was so excited about Swipe. It's Texas Chainsaw, but just women.
Yeah.
Imagine that, a crazy mother, and Crust is basically Little Shop of Horrors. If the guy liked, if he liked Audrey too eating the people, because he was sad, right? Because he's depressed. So the flip is it's a sock, but he's not upset about it. He likes it, right?
Yeah.
And so, but Ryan Coogler, who we don't know except for most people don't know Fruitvale Station, which was his first movie. That's how Michael B. Jordan broke or whatever. And I saw that, and I loved it, a small independent. But then he did, Black Panther and all the other, the other movies. You can tell this was a very special project. But again, it's like a sharecropper 1932 South Black experience. Is it a socially conscious movie? And is it a thing about culture? Is it a thing about a coming of age story? Is it a music? It's all of it. And it's a horror, and that's what's great is that, and it's impossible to see once. So what's exciting is that you see that he made a deal to go, look, I'll do this big Hollywoods one, but I'm going to do this one. And so that's why I'm getting excited, is to keep making movies that are lower budget, because these people make movies that are just too, like I saw Y2K. I don't know if you saw that. It was super fun. Did you see that?
Yeah.
I thought it was fun and silly. Like Kyle, they spent $15 million, and I was like, I could have made that movie for one.
Yeah.
We're not in the day of big luxurious trailers anymore.
Right.
Right. And now that I'm producing, I go, I don't need that. It doesn't, I need I'd love a comfortable place. It doesn't have to be a 60-foot trailer.
Right.
I'm never going to use everything you put in here. There's just no way. I'm not going to use the TV or the oven or what I mean?
Yeah.
So why don't you just make a very comfortable things I'm going to use? A nice TV, a nice little plate, nice bathroom. You know what I mean? And you realize that it's almost like when we used to have to get first class to go to San Francisco, and I'm in LA. It's a 45-minute flight. And I thought, that's wasteful. I don't need that. If you can, and I'm traveling far, put me in business class.
Right.
Make me a little more comfortable. And I understand, like, comfort is this thing, but I also know that community, having all of us, like, not in our trailers separate, but all together in one place and having a common goal and stuff, it makes it more about the movie,
Yeah.
Yep.
Instead of just a gig.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So me and Rebecca's goal, now that we have our two production companies and are doing some stuff, is just quality scripts. And luckily, I feel like Crust was, and our next one is, and we got big talent because they wanted to be a part of something interesting. And having women be there's a 6'5" woman who carries a sickle. They're all mute. None of them talk. And then there's bald-headed woman who's just all in black, and she carries a little dibber and she whistles. And
Oh,
then
wow.
Hana Lee with her little, she has wind chimes and she dances around with her wind chimes, which is super creepy. So
Well,
that makes it fun.
Bladed dildo. I'll just say that.
But it was so interesting. I said to the author, I said, it's always very important to know what the movie's about. And he said, it's unresolved family trauma. And I went, there you go.
Yep.
The sister and the brother have a trauma. I don't think we can get away from mental health in anything.
No.
Right?
No. So our other pod called Family Twist, and it's all about DNA, because we found Kendall's birth family. He was adopted at birth.
Wow.
Both of his parents were dead by the time he was 16. And so years and years went by, and we found his family. We moved from San Francisco to New England just because we found his dad and his sister.
Wow.
And we've talked about, so we've been doing that podcast, not just at his story, but like other people's stories that are they say there's 1 in 20 people who have misattributed parentage. And I'm like, there are stories in the stories people tell. Like there's a couple horror.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
that is good.
It's so exciting to see someone like yourself that is having this like change, like that doesn't happen for everybody, and that's what podcasting has done for us. Idea how therapeutic it would be to do these, and it's like, this is our pivot. Like we're pivoting now. This is what we're going to do to close out our career.
Yeah. No, I think I love this idea that the mental health, because I don't know, I feel like Twilight Zone, and I loved Twilight Zone, as you can tell from from Crust, but he would always, and then the people who got it wrong would emphasize the twist of what happened. It's the To Serve Man is a cookbook, like that kind of stuff. Well, it was never the twist; it was how people reacted to what was happening. Mm-hmm. The humanity of it. Planet of the Apes, in the middle of that movie, is a long thing about humans shouldn't run any planet, let alone this one. And it was a dialogue. It was like a play. And that's Rod Serling, because he was so interested in, with his horror, sci-fi, all of it, examining the human condition through that. Yeah. And I think that's what good horror does, is how do people react to terrifying situations. And I think when we see that, I don't know why people love the horror stuff, but man, it really joins people together and uplifts them and makes it seem like they have a place to go and they can see themselves in these movies, And I think that's huge. I think it's really fun. You know?
Absolutely. So, you made People Under Us 35 years ago, your first film, Wes Craven, an icon. What away from him, like as a filmmaker now?
Yeah. The set vibe starts from the top, and he was very mellow and very chill. And he really cared about acting. He really wanted it to be as truthful as possible that's an acting definition, being truthful under an imaginary circumstance, and he would put us in crazy circumstances, but he wanted us to be very human, And he allowed, like Roach's death scene. I told him, I said, I want to be very sad, but not show him anything. So he allowed me to go around the corner and get very prepared and very sad. And, people would come up and go, is he okay? And he'd go, he's working, and that was lovely for him to care enough to have a good performance. And I'm very happy with that death scene because he let me do that, and it is more heartbreaking because he's trying to be really strong and, help the girl before he goes. And I think that was the lesson, is you have to care about your acting. And the other thing that was really cool is that you have to be a fan of everybody you're working with, and he was a fan of the special effects. He loved all of it. So I think that makes people feel really good when you say, God, this is amazing. Yeah.
And he definitely had a gift of putting a cast together. I mean, that movie couldn't be more better cast.
Unbelievable. Yeah. Unbelievable. Young Ving Rhames. I mean, come on.
He's so good at it. And it's like, what a risk
Yeah.
two of your leads are children, because they could go sideways like real fast. Like people, especially like kids in horror movies. Like I think 9 times out of 10 people like hate the kids in horror movies, but not the. I mean, those two were fantastic.
No, and that you know what? That's so true. They always get such a tough time. The kids. She was 19, I think, playing younger, and he was obviously Brandon was a kid.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. And he's such a likable kid, you know?
Yeah.
That's why he did really well.
Yeah. You mentioned as a very impactful character. Like, I'm just curious the interactions you have with fans at the horror conventions, at the conventions that are really love that movie. Like, what are those interactions like?
I think that it's because it's a cult movie, and I still stand by that, because if you say, oh, I was in People Under the Stairs, they'll go, I'm talking outside of the horror community.
Yeah, right.
A lot of people don't know it. They know Wes from Scream and Freddy, and the most interesting thing is I always ask how young you were when you saw it, because I forget there's the father is being kind of like a pedophile to the girl, and there's incest and cannibalism. Like, there's Three Stooges comedy too.
Right.
The elect stuff on the door and the wacky, like me bonking him in the head with the slingshot. It's so strange. It's such a strange movie. But some people will say, you scared me as a kid. I will get, you scared me as a kid, and you were my first crush. Like, so many women go, Roach was my first crush. And I'll be like, sweetie, that says way more about you than me.
Right.
I was like pale and long fingers. What are you talking? But mostly,
half a tongue.
I think people, half a tongue. They were like, man, this really is. It's just such a unique movie. So it's either you haven't seen it or people love it. I haven't gotten a person go, it was okay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I think it's so out there that I think it's either going to be, either. And I just haven't had anyone going, no, I didn't like it, Right. Of course, they're not going to come to my table and go, I didn't like your movie. So maybe they, but I just know a lot of people who know it, love it, because I think it's because it is so weird.
Yeah.
And Roach is such you're like, oh, why did people love you? Oh, well, because I was kidnapped by a mother and husband and wife who were really brother and sister, thrown into a basement, had my tongue cut out, but I'm smart enough to get out. And I crawled between the walls trying to protect the young girl.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm an insurance salesman.
Right. Exactly.
It's a lot different. So I think that's it. I think people love the insanity. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that you're just, because it's such a different kind of movie. It's beyond, and I think that's what I also took away. I am not interested in a cookie cutter formula.
Yeah.
And obviously Wes is not at all.
No.
Most of the things he does, he was always breaking the mold.
And I think it does come down to like some of them see in the theater at a certain age. Like, I was 15 when it came out, so I had to sneak in, because it's definitely a movie with my other buddy who we always, bought tickets to whatever PG comedy and timed it just right to pop into the theater to watch the R-rated horror movie. But it's like that, and like around the same time, Breed, and there's a couple of movies around the early 90s that are just like, oh, okay, wow, this is why it stuck with me, because it's so weird and off the wall. And just watching it again last night, I'm like, this is a fucked up movie.
Yeah. It's really weird.
Yeah.
It's very, so I finally came up with the term in my tail. I go, look, the movie is what I call, it's very twisted. It's a twisted, weird movie. And I mean, come on, the ending is insane. Yes. What horror movie ends with, spoilers, but what movie ends with, a little kid getting, the little kid gets the gold.
Right. Right.
And all these people, the people under the stairs are free, and a house blows up, and all the, tenants are grabbing. It's just such a weird. It's insane.
Absolutely.
And it's so great, though.
Yeah.
And Jordan Peele is remaking it, and people are like, "Oh, how do you feel about that?" And I just said, "Look, remakes are tough, regardless, But there's been better versions of certain things, and you could argue." Star is Born has been good and crappy and then really good again, or you know, But I think he'll do it justice because he loved it as a kid. I guess it was one of his favorite movies. And he said the same thing that Brandon Adams said. And they said, why? And he said, because I never saw a little black kid save the day on screen.
Right.
You know, I'm saying save the day on screen. And he goes, that was so powerful for him. He said he used it as, you know, for Get Out. It was an inspiration for Get Out because of slow burn and having a black lead. I think, you know, there was one person who commented, it was like, oh, so the white people are going to be the bad guys and the black people are the good guys. And I go, what, like the original? What do you mean?
Right.
I mean, that's the original. He's not going to have to do anything.
No.
And the movie is exactly that. And I go, and they're not saying all white people are terrible.
No.
All black people are great. They're saying these people, these white slumlords are insane, and they're insane. They're crazy insane. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see. But I mean, are you kidding? I want to try out for Daddy.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's a fantastic idea. I mean, I do no wrong. Like, I love the three feature films that he's directed. I've loved Key. Sure. Key and Peele is definitely in contention for favorite sketch show. And he's stuff too, like the Candy, you know, that he produced.
Yes.
And they announced this remake before the election.
Yeah.
So
it'll be interesting.
Yes. Could it be more timely? I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't know. If anyone was going to remake it, I'm glad it's him. You know, because I think he'll mention Roach. He was talking about claustrophobia in horror movies, and he was like, well, you remember Roach? He was like trapped between the walls and stuff, you know? Yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh, he mentioned it again.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to lobby him to audition for Daddy. Even if I don't get it, I just want to.
We'll put it out to the universe.
I've done it all except a really good Western. I need to do a Western, and then I'll be complete.
All right. We'll get to writing that Western horror movie. We need another Western horror.
Yeah, see that? That's
Yeah.
Well, Ryan Coogler kind of beat me too. But anyway,
Bone, when the next flick is coming?
Beginning of next year, the Swipe should be coming out.
Awesome.
So
cool.
We'll have a trailer hopefully in a couple months.
Awesome. Yeah.
It's great.
We'd love to have you back on and talk about it.
For sure.
We have a tradition that the last question we ask every guest is, who is your favorite final person in a horror movie? The survivor.
I think I always go back to Laurie Strode in Halloween, the first one.
Yeah.
Just because, you know, they treated her like shit in school, you know? And if anyone didn't have a reason to live, it was her, right? But I always just felt good it was her because it wasn't, I don't know, a lot of the final girls are kind of badass or whatever. And I just love that. I love that she was so lost, you know, she was so scared and, you know, but man, I'll never forget that moment ever. The theater when they got up and looked on the grass and he was gone.
I know.
Never forget that, man. I have chills talking about it right
now.
now. Because I was like,
I loved it.
It's never been done. It was so great, you know, and it was such a terrifying ending. Because I think I thought about that. Wow, that's so much scarier, you know, than a happy ending.
Right.
Yep.
You know, oh, they got him. We'll take him to the morgue. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was scary, and the way the music just started to.
I know.
But I think I've seen a lot, but I definitely think her. I never thought about it, but I just think that, because she was such a misfit, you know? And it's great.
Well, we keep a tally, and I think she's definitely at the top of the list. You know, there's been a few surprises.
Well, I think Halloween gave us permission to go, it's a horror movie. There is no good ending. Well, Night of the Living Dead as well, probably. But I mean, you know, a scary ending is great. Yeah. We all remember, what's his name that just passed, the great actor at the end of
Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
I'll never forget
from that point. I played that character for Halloween 5 years ago. I love that movie.
It's so good, man. What a great costume. How funny. You just have a huge mustache. Big curly hair, the trench coat. And I had a stuffed dog that I put a human mask on the face, like the dog that does the switch. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
That's so great.
Yeah.
You'll have to send me a photo of that
over here for sure.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
It's a great question. Thank you so
Of
much
course,
for having
yeah.
me. And I think the fact that horror brings people together, and like there's a lot of people who don't have a community, and they find their community at these horror conventions and make lifelong friends. It's fantastic.
Yep. If you take one thing away from today's episode, let it be this. There are no shortcuts to mental health, but horror might just be the scenic route. Sean Whalen poured his pain into Crust and came out the other side with something beautiful, bonkers, and surprisingly heartfelt. It's a reminder that sometimes our weirdest stories are the most healing, and that horror fans don't age out, they level up. We'll be cheering for Sean as he brings Swipe to life next, complete with sinister sisters, sharp commentary, and yes, a bladed dildo. Big thanks to Sean for getting raw, weird, and wonderfully honest with us. And to you, dear listeners, may your monsters be fluffy, your fandom be fierce, and your dryer never eat the wrong sock. And remember, when someone asks, is horror good for mental wellness? You tell them, of course it is. The Horror Heals podcast is produced and presented by How the Cow Ate the Cabbage, LLC.